name is Conrad Stoll, and I'm an iOS architect at Mutual Mobile in Austin, Texas. And I'm going to be talking to you guys a little bit today about developing wearable software. And the reason I call it wearable software is just to emphasize that this is a new platform. So, as developers on Apple platforms, most of us have familiarity developing for iOS as well as for the Mac. And the watch is this new platform that we have access to, and it's one that a lot of users care a lot about. So when the Apple Watch was released, I started developing for it almost immediately, and I actually shipped about 6 different watch apps alongside the hardware launch of the watch in April of last year. So that was all client development as well as a few personal projects. As part of that, I worked on an open source library called Wearable. So if anybody did any watchOS 1 development, you may have seen that around for, I see a few people nodding back, for sending data back and forth between the iPhone and the Apple Watch. So there's other ways to do that now, but that was sort of the genesis of me working on the watch. I think the Apple Watch is awesome, and it's not just because I use it every day. I wear it and I use it. But I think it's really interesting to realize that there are millions of people that choose to, every night when they go to sleep, take the watch off and put it on a charger, and then put it back on when they wake up. And they don't just do that for fun. They do it because they like having the watch on. It means something to them. So I think that's important to think about, that regardless of our own opinions about what the watch is like to develop for it, or how useful we find third-party apps in the watch, there are a lot of people that are a highly captive audience that care about wearing that watch every day, and I think that's an important thing to consider. Of all the things that I've learned developing apps for the watch, it's that apps should do one thing and do it really well. And the reason is user attention span. That people often sit there on their phones at the bus stop or at the store or whatever, checking their phones, but nobody will sit like this with their wrist for more than a few seconds. And so having an app that does too many things or requires some configuration or exploration to make it useful just isn't going to result in a good experience for people. And so if you want to have an app that's really successful on the watch, you should really focus on really one or two features and really just doing that one task or showing one piece of information with as much clarity as possible. So for the demo here today, we're going to build an app from the ground up. And it's going to order a beer, because I don't have an app on my watch that orders a beer yet, and that's something I'd really like to have. So we're going to make an app for the Apple Watch that orders a beer. Just to walk you through what it looks like if you've never ordered beer before. The first step is to raise your wrist, like this. The second step is to open your watch app. Pick which beer you want to order. Order your beer by presumably tapping on a button, and wait for your beer to be delivered. So let's assume we've already raised our wrist. The first thing we need to do is open the watch app. And the good news is that complications are a great way, they're really the best way, in my opinion, to open apps on the Apple Watch. And now in watchOS 3, I think Apple has realized this, because now we can have multiple watch faces that we slide between, that have different configurations and complications. So for myself, I have this is my main watch face. It's mostly fitness oriented. So the apps at the bottom are the bottom left is Runtime, which is a running app that I maintain, and that's showing me my step total for the day. The one in the bottom center is UA Record by Under Armour, which is an app that I work on that is an overall health and fitness dashboard. And then the Apple Activity Rings on the bottom right. And so that's what I usually see when I look at my watch face. But if I want to start cooking something, or maybe I'm brewing coffee at home, I can slide to the right, and my next watch face has a bunch of timers and stopwatch complications on it. And that makes it easy that if I want to launch a timer, I can just slide to the right once and tap on the timer complication, and I have quick access to that app. Likewise, if I want to start a workout, I can tap on one of those icons at the bottom and immediately start a workout. This is what that looks like. So I'm tapping on the UA record complication, and you can see in WatchOS 3, the app starts up immediately. That's because new in WatchOS 3, all of the watch apps are being kept in memory. There's also the dock, so you can tap the side button to swipe between apps that you've favorited or that are already running. But I still feel like, even with the dock, the complications are the best way to launch apps. So that's what we're going to start off with here today. We're going to make a complication for our beer button app that is prompting the user to place an order. So I'm going to go into Xcode, and I'll just show you real quick what the app looks like so far. That's way too small to see. So I'm going to use this handy-dandy simulator tool called Bezel. It's an awesome app. You can go check that out. It lets us see what our app is going to look like when it's surrounded by an actual Apple Watch band. And I can also double the size of it, which is really handy for this. So you can see what the just default complication looks like. And that's set in the modular watch face in the large complication section. And if I go over to the app's info plist and zoom in a little bit here, you can see I've already added the key that tells the Apple Watch that I have an available complication for the modular large family size. So now, if I go over to our complication controller, this is a class that we specify in that plist that will be called an ask to provide timeline entries for our complication. And the reason we specify timeline entries is that we can have information on the watch face either in the past or in the future based on the time travel feature. So if you use the digital crown to scroll backwards or forwards, you can see content that's either already happened or that you're predicting will happen in the future. So there's a current timeline entry method that we can call the handler block with an entry for a specific date. So I'm going to delete that. And I have a place order implementation here. And what that's doing is it's creating a new timeline entry, and it's creating a template for the modular large standard body. And if I command click on the template, of course that's not going to work. You can go into the documentation for the ClockKit framework, and you can see there's lots of different options for templates. If I scroll down to the large ones, you can see there's a large standard body, there's a large tall body, there's a column and table layout. So there's a lot of design flexibility you can have with what you choose to show in your complication. But for us, we're just going to stick with the standard body. And we need to give it some text. So we do that by creating a text provider. And the first line in the header is going to be called beer button, which is just the name of our app. And the second line is place order. So we're trying to tell the user what's going to happen when they tap on that complication. We give it the current date, and we return that entry. There's one more thing that I want to do here. And that is implement the optional method for returning a localized sample for our complication. And I'm doing that with the same template and the same content. And the reason I'm doing that is so that before our app actually runs at a given time, the system will know what to put in that preview of the complication. So you might see this in the watch face gallery on the iPhone. You might see this when you're picking the complication from the complication selection screen, which is after you force touch on the watch face. So let me go ahead and run this again and show you what that's going to look like. And I set a breakpoint here in our interface controller's awake with context method. So this is the first thing that's going to get called when our watch app loads. And you can see one of the things we're doing when our app loads is we're updating our complications. There's a few other setup tasks that we're doing, like initiating our watch connectivity session and setting the delegate and activating it. We're also configuring the UI and doing some more things I'll talk about later. But if I go into this, I don't know why command click's not working today. If I go into the update complication function, you can see that I'm getting the complication server and calling reload timeline for all of the active complications. So let me go ahead and disable this breakpoint up here. Allow the app to continue. And the interface controller is still blank, but when I go back to the main watch face, you can see that the complication has been reloaded and it's now saying place order. In order to get the complication to show up in the watch face gallery on the iPhone, there's two things you need to do. Well, three things you need to do. First, you need to implement that method, the localizable template method that we already implemented. And then you need to go up to the File, Save Complication Bundle option and click on that. And go ahead and save that somewhere. And what that's going to do is create this little gallery CK complication that has this handy little JSON file in it with just a little bit of information. And if you add that to your iPhone project, which I've actually already done, it's over here attached to my iPhone target. If you have that done, when you launch your iPhone app, the actual Apple Watch app on the iPhone, and you go to the face gallery, which is the second tab, you can see in featured complications what your complication will look like for that watch face. So you can change the colors and get a preview of what it's going to look like. So this is a really cool feature for developers because this is going to be a great way for users to discover your app. They don't actually have to have your watch app installed on their watch to use this feature. So the first time that they set up their watch on the iPhone, they'll be mostly using this app on the iPhone and trying to figure out what apps are available. And presumably they already have your app installed, but they may not know that you have an app on the Apple Watch. So having a complication and having it featured in this gallery is going to be really useful for discoverability. Cool. So now we've got our complication. Let's move on to actually building our watch app. And I talked about this a little bit a moment ago, but really our goal for interaction on Apple Watch is 2 seconds or less. And so that's from the time that the user raises their wrist and performs some interaction and lowers their wrist. We're shooting for 2 seconds, and that's not a lot of time to do something. So anything we build on the watch has to be very optimized for no navigation, as few of options as possible, very fast loading performance. So that's the goal we're going to be shooting for. Some of the good news is that when you're working with WatchKit, there's not really a lot of code involved. There's various reasons for that. Certainly one of them is that you have access to all of the code you've written on your iPhone app. So if you have utilities for things like formatting or fetching data or storing data, you can reuse a lot of that for your watch app. All of the UI for our watch app is defined using a storyboard. And that's a little bit different from iOS, where you're kind of encouraged to use a storyboard, but you can still create views manually. You can't do that on the Apple Watch. You need to create all of your view content in the storyboard, but you can still configure it using code. So part of the demo will be showing you how to do that. When you're configuring your UI in the storyboard, you're going to be using groups. And groups are a kind of unique to the watch form of layout and organization. So if you want for content to be aligned to either side of the interface or the top or bottom, or sized dynamically based on its content size or relative to a certain percentage of the available width or height, you can use groups to accomplish all of those things. Groups can also have corner radius properties, background color, alpha. You can nest groups inside of each other. They can have a background image. So there's really no limit to the kind of customization you can create using groups in your watch app. This is just an example of what a watch storyboard looks like. This is one that we created for The Economist, which is an audio player app. So the top three screenshots are a paginated interface for playback and track controls and a track list and playlist to choose articles to listen to. And the screens on the right are notification interface controllers. So if you want to have a custom presentation for a notification, that's what you can use to specify a layout for that notification. Another thing that's fun to use for when you're developing for the Apple Watch is the digital crown, and that's the unique form of input that we have access to as developers on the Watch platform. And the digital crown is really useful for precise input and for selecting something in a list, any kind of interaction like that. And in watchOS 2, we already had the WK interface picker, which is very similar to iOS. So if you've seen a date picker or something along those lines, you're probably already familiar with how this works on the watch. And new in watchOS 3 is the crown sequencer. And that's our way of building very fine-grained, customized controls that can use the digital crown for input. So we're going to show you guys both of those in the demo here in a second. This is an example from the UA Record app with Under Armour. So we're using the digital crown for two things. We're using it to select an activity type to start a workout, and we're also using it to scroll between quadrants on our health and fitness dashboard. So that was a really good way in watchOS 2 to select which quadrant you wanted more detailed information for. New in watchOS 3, you can actually just use gestures to tap on those things, but that wasn't available in watchOS 2. And in watchOS 3, we can scroll through different activities to start a workout. And one little hack to make this a little bit more user-friendly experience is to automatically scroll to the last index for a workout you started. So if your last workout was yoga, automatically scroll to yoga, assuming that somebody who does that workout type often will want to select that one again. So that's just one way to speed things up. And finally, when we're building our app for the Apple Watch, more than likely we're going to need to communicate with our iPhone in some form or fashion. And that's all done using watch connectivity. So in the case of our beer button app, we have a list of beers that's on our iPhone app, and those are options for us to order from. So we're going to be showing you how to get that information from the iPhone app and get it into the Apple Watch app so that we have options to order from. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump back into the demo. I'll show you just real briefly what the iPhone app looks like. So these are the beers that I've input that I thought might be nice to order from, lagers and stouts, and I like pumpkin beer, so there's a pumpkin beer in there. And if I go back to our Apple Watch app and bezel, you can see that when we tap on it, there's no content yet. So the first thing we're going to do is add some content to our interface controller. In the iPhone app, this has already been done, so I'll just show you what the code looks like. We've set ourselves as the delegate for our WC session and activated our session. And then down a little bit lower, there's a method here called update watch beers. And we're going to get the array of beers, just formatted into an array of content. And we're going to use the application context update method to send that information in the background over to the Watch app. So this code has already been done. It can sometimes take a few seconds to a minute to transfer that in the background. So I didn't want to wait for that to happen. But this is the way that you can transfer content in the background to the watch. There are other methods of transferring data back and forth between devices, including real-time messaging for very small payloads, as well as the transfer file methods. So it really depends on your context and what you're trying to do for which method of communication on watch connectivity is going to be right for your application. In our storyboard here, and new in Xcode 8, I can actually zoom in, so we have a giant storyboard there. So let's go ahead and add a picker first, just to show you what that looks like. So I can drag the picker over here, and I'm going to set its outlet to be the picker. And there's a couple of different styles. I'll show you what the stack style looks like, and I'll also have a focus style, so that when it's in focus, it's outlined. Let me just rerun. We'll show you what that looks like. Cool. So the first image was one for a logger, and that's the one that loads first. And if I scroll up and down on the trackpad, I can simulate input to the digital crown. I'm going to load bezel again so it's a little easier to see. So this is what the stack style looks like. For our app, we actually want to have the content embedded into a button. And so what's useful about the picker control is you can actually have an action that's defined that whenever the index changes, some method that you specify will be called to tell you what the new index is. And so what I'd really like to do is whenever the index changes, to take the beer image and title and set that on my own button so that the content is presented behind the button when you actually tap on it. So one of the ways I can do that, and just to illustrate, there are a couple of possibilities here. I'm going to set the style of our picker to list and the focus style to none. And I'm actually going to change the height of this to be really small. And by changing it to be really small and not completely hidden, the picker will actually still function, but you won't be able to see it. So that's one way for us to customize our interface a little bit, that is to forward all of the picker actions to a different control, but still have the picker on screen to receive digital crown input. So if I get a group and add that here, I can also grab a button and add that into the group. And I know that my button needs to be a specific height, so I'm gonna actually set it to fixed height over here on the right to 100, fixed width to 100, and I'd like it to be centered horizontally, and I can leave it as top aligned. For the containing group, I'm going to set it to be a vertical layout, just because that's vertical for the watch tends to be how I think about things. And I'll set both of my outlets, one for the group, one for the button. And I also, for the button, I have a background image. So I want to make it actually look sort of more like a button. Forgive my designer skills, and I'm not very good at drawing buttons. I'll run this real quick. Oh, there's one thing that I forgot. I'll let it load anyway, but there's one more thing that we're going to have to do. So I'm scrolling on the trackpad, and you notice that nothing's actually changing. The first image is shown there because the picker did load, but I forgot to set the action for the picker did scroll method. So it loaded once, but it's not loading for any of the subsequent indexes. So if I go back to the picker, I can select the picker over here on the top left, and control click and drag to the interface controller, and select picker did change for our action method. Now if I rerun, it should actually update. Okay, so here our action is picker did change, and I'm going to disable the breakpoint and go down to configuring the order UI. And that's doing a couple of things. It's setting the background image on the group, as well as setting the title on the button. And the reason it's setting the background image on the group instead of the button is because I want to use the corner radius property on the group to mask the beer image into a circle. Right. So it's a porter, a logger, sorry, bezel, pumpkin, porter, amber. We'll go back up to logger. So I'm tapping on the button now, but nothing's happening yet. So let's make it actually possible to place an order now. If I go back to our storyboard, I can control click again from our button to set the did order beer action. So that's the method that will be called when we tap on our button. And there's a few other interface items that I would like to add, so that we can customize our presentation a little bit more while an order is in progress. I'm going to add a label for the title of the beer that we're going to be ordering. Give that the beer title. I don't actually want this to be visible right now, so I'm going to give it a 0 alpha. I'm giving it an alpha instead of hiding it because I still want that space to be reserved for the label when it becomes visible later. And I'm going to add another label that will be used as our timer. So that will be the countdown until our beer is actually delivered. And I want that to be centered horizontally, so it's underneath the button. And there's one other thing that I want to do. So I'm going to add a tap gesture recognizer to our label. And from the tap gesture recognizer, I'm going to select a tap action to focus the date picker. And this is a little custom control that I've made to allow us to select a time at which our beer will be delivered. Let me show you what this is going to look like. Okay, so I'll select a pumpkin beer, and I'm going to tap to order it. And you can see that a few things happened. Our timer is now counting down, so our beer will be delivered in 5 minutes, which was the default. But the app UI hasn't really changed. It's not in a very different state. And although the timer is now counting down, it's not terribly obvious at first glance that something happened. So I'd really like to make it just a tad more obvious that some change was made. And we can do that by using animation. So I'm going to cancel this order and return back to our default state. And if I go back to our interface controller, there's a method here called configure UI. And that method is being called with a status. And our ordered status can either be ordered, or none. And in the ordered status, there's a few things we're already doing. First of all, we're hiding the button, and we're making the title visible. So now it will say title below the image and above the timer. And if I do one more thing here, I can add a bunch more animations that will be triggered when we tap on this button. I can set the alignment of our group to be left aligned and top aligned, and align everything else to the left. And I can also set the group's height and width to be smaller, and set the corner radius accordingly to also be a different size. And the reason that this is all going to be animated is up here in the did order beer IB action, we have an animation block. And so if you haven't done any watch work yet, but you're familiar with the UI view animations on the iPhone, this is basically the same idea. Any interface updates you perform inside of this animation block will be animated. So now if I go back and run again, I'll go ahead and pick a logger. And I just tapped on the label down there at the bottom, and I just started scrolling again. And so that gave focus to the picker that is controlling that label's content. And there's a new delegate method here called crown did rotate that passes in a crown sequencer and a rotational delta. And I can actually use that to, based on the direction of scroll, as well as the velocity of scrolling, I can increment or decrement the time interval for that label so that we can order our beer further or less time in the future. So just you can read the code in the sample project that's posted on GitHub, but that's the delegate method that's going to get called. And I'm going to continue through this and launch Bezel again. And you can see it's scrolling up, so it's about 15 minutes. I can go back down if I want to. And if I scroll really in a very slow fashion, it's incrementing a little bit slower. How much time do we actually have left? About 15 minutes. I'll leave it at about 15. And we'll go ahead and place our order. So you saw the nice little animation there. All of the content is now animated up into the top left. So this doesn't really look like a button anymore. It should be very obvious now that we are now waiting for our beer to arrive. Cool. One of the things that's most important now, I think, in watchOS 3, especially now that Apple has made apps launch a lot faster and be able to keep their content up to date in the background, is that they should really be glanceable. And I don't think glances were the best way of doing this. I think that complications are certainly the best way because they're the screen that you're going to be interacting with the most with the watch face. And also the dock is also very useful for showing up-to-date content. But really, even your app itself, having its content always up-to-date and relevant is very important because as apps launch so much faster now, you can't really depend on the 10-second delay in loading the app for fetching new content or something like that to have something to show. It's really important to keep your content up-to-date in the background. And there's new ways of doing this. So there's the WK refresh background task, and that's what's going to be given to your app whenever you schedule a new refresh to occur. And you can schedule a refresh almost as often as you need to, and they'll be given to you on basically a system-determined basis based on how many other apps are running, whether or not your app is in a complication on the watch face, whether or not it's currently selected in the dock. So there's a variety of factors that factor into how often you'll actually get a background refresh task. But that's your opportunity to do some work or kick off some new network requests or watch connectivity requests to keep your content up to date. This is what the app can look like in the dock. So it is very similar to a glance, but it's important to know that when your app is selected in the dock, it is actually running. So you can update content as often as you want to while your app is selected in the dock. But the other thing I really want to focus on here is complications, and this idea that great watch apps are also great complications. And the best complications are going to be the ones that always have relevant content to show to the user. So the next update we're going to make to our app is to show a countdown timer for when our beer will be delivered inside of the complication. So that way, after the user orders their beer, they can drop their wrist and close their watch app, but they can still see from their watch face a quick little very glanceable timer showing them when their beer is going to be delivered. I'm going to go ahead and open our extension delegate real quick just to show you a few things that are happening here. And our app is still running, so I'll just go ahead and launch it in the simulator. You can see we've got about 11.5 minutes until our beer is going to be delivered. And if I go into the dock, you can see a couple of things have happened here. The first one is that in this, let's see, let me just disable that for a second. So now we're in the dock, and if I slide back and forth, you can see there's a method here inside of our extension delegate that's called handle background tasks. And the type of task that it's actually being called with here is a snapshot task. And if I go back to the simulator, you can see what I did. I scrolled over to the side, so now the Messages app is the currently active app, which means that our beer button app is now resigned active. And this is our opportunity to update our snapshot content. So the next time we scroll back to our app, if we want to show something else, we have the opportunity to kind of refresh the UI a little bit. This method gets called for any kind of refresh background task. So it's also a great opportunity if we want to handle just a generic refresh task. I can scroll down here to show you what we do there. This is where we can actually reload our complication content again. So the background refresh task can be called for any variety of reasons, but we can also schedule our own refresh. So I've done that. Let's see, where did we do that? In the schedule background refresh method down here, it's called when the app is deactivated. We can schedule a refresh to happen like 5 minutes from now. You can kind of specify whatever interval makes sense for your content. but this is one of our opportunities to reload the content for our complication whenever a background task is given to us to handle. So that breakpoint is now disabled. I'm going to go back here and re-enable the one that I had disabled a moment ago. And what this is actually doing is we're given this opportunity to change the content that is displayed in the dock whenever the app becomes active or goes to be inactive. And so what we're doing here is we have a timer that's running that's updating the remaining time until our beer will be delivered. And in the normal state, when we're not being snapshotted, we're just setting the text directly. But in the snapshot state, we're actually using the label's attributed text system to set a larger font size to really emphasize the timer when it's in the dock. So when the app is shrunk down in the dock, we expand the timer label to make it easier to read. So let me disable that breakpoint and show you what that actually looks like. So now we have this larger timer. If I click on the app, the timer goes back to normal size, and if I go back into the dock, it's larger size. And the callback for that to actually happen is in the extension delegate. So just to show you briefly what that looks like, from the extension delegate, there's the did become active and will resign active methods, and from there we're calling emphasize and de-emphasize order, which trigger that reload of the snapshot to change the font size. Okay. If I go back to the watch face, you can see that our complication still says place order, which indicates that we haven't actually ordered a beer, so that's not really what we're going for. So if I go back to our complication controller in the get current timeline entry, I can add some new content that will allow us to show a little bit more relevant information while an order is currently in progress. So we can get the current order and make sure we've got the order title and order date, and create the same type of template with that large standard body, and set the header just to order status, so that it's very clear, this is the status of an order, and set the second line of text to the title of the beer, so we know what we've ordered. And then there's also a relative date text provider, which is a really useful way to show a count up or count down timer inside of a complication. So rather than having to update that complication every second to display new relevant content, you can use the system-provided relative date text provider to let it do that work for you. And you specify a date that you're counting up or down to, and a style, which in this case is timer. And we really care about second level precision here on when our beer is going to be delivered. So we're setting it to the .second property. And I can return that complication timeline entry. And for the rest of it, go ahead and put this in the else statement. Cool. So I'm going to stop that and run that one more time. All right, so a little less than 6 minutes remaining. And if I go back to the watch face now, you can see the complication is updated to now show order status, and it's still counting down. So now we're good. We can glance at our watch, raise our wrist, glance at the watch face, and it'll tell it we have a little over 5 minutes until our beer is going to be delivered. The last thing I want to talk about is giving users the confidence to drop their wrist. And so after we do something like order a beer, the last thing we want to do is show somebody a loading indicator, like saying that we're doing something like initiating a web request, or confirming that there's still inventory of that beer, or something along those lines. We really just want to give people that confidence that, no, we've got it. You can drop your wrist now, and you've got a timer if you need it, but we'll notify you when your beer is going to be delivered. One of the ways we can do this is animation and confirmation. And this is just a little sample video of some animations we've included in the UA Record app. But you notice that one of the things we did with our interface controller was add that animation at the end, so that when we tapped on the button, we didn't just start the countdown timer, we also changed the state of the interface to indicate that something has happened and we've successfully ordered your beer. So one of the things we're doing here in this app is going through the save and discard workout flow. So when we go to save the workout, we're animating a little check mark to indicate that we've successfully saved your workout. Now, it's really important to emphasize that when we show that success check mark, we have not saved your workout yet. There's actually a lot of steps involved in saving your workout, including storing the workout to HealthKit, transferring the workout to the iPhone, updating the local storage on the iPhone, posting it to a web service. Some of those may not even happen if you're doing the workout with your watch separate from the phone. They won't even take place until you go back and look at your phone again, and they repair with each other. So we don't want people to wait for any of those things to happen. We want for them to just have this confidence that we are taking care of this for them, and they can go about their business, and we'll notify them if anything goes wrong. And notifications are really our best way to do that. Just checking my time here, I've got 3.5 minutes left. And there have already been really good notifications on the Apple Watch because it's a great way to have actions, so you can have interactive notifications, as well as to display customized content. So something like the ESPN SportsCenter app will show you pictures of athletes and stories, which really, it's kind of a very immersive notification experience. And you notice iOS 10 got a very similar feature this year. So notifications are great. New on watchOS 3, we can actually present local notifications from the watch itself. You didn't used to be able to do that. You could sort of fake it by sending a message to the iPhone and having it present a notification for you. But now you can actually present all of your own local notifications on the watch. So we're going to make one of those that will notify us when our beer is going to be delivered. So in my interface controller, I actually have some code here to notify the user already. So it's going to create a new UN mutable notification content object and set up the content with the title and any additional relevant content I want to display, and set the category identifier to beer button order delivery. Then we're going to create a trigger that will trigger the notification about 20 seconds before the beer will actually be delivered based on the order date. And then it's going to create a notification request. And it's going to create that request with a unique identifier. And it's really important to actually use a unique identifier here, because when they say unique, they really mean unique. And you can only have one notification ever fired with that unique identifier. So having something like this string with UUID is really important. And then we just get the current notification center and post that notification. And I think we're not going to quite make this time, so I'm going to go ahead and cancel that order, and I'll present a new one in a second. In our interface controller, you create a custom notification by adding a new notification interface controller. So I can do that here. Just drag this down. And when you tap on the segue, you can set the notification category name. So I already copied the beer button order delivery category name, so I can just paste that there. And we're going to have a dynamic interface, so I can select that option. On the static notification, which will be shown if you don't have time to load the dynamic one, I'm just going to put some generic content like your beer is being delivered. And I can set the line wrap to 0 so it will size to fit. And this is just a generic notification. We don't have any additional content to show. But in the dynamic one, if I set it up so that we have a custom class that implements this notification, I can also give us a label. And that label we can set in our notification interface controller. Set it to also 0 for lines. And I've got a timer. So we'll have a timer for when our beer is going to be delivered that will change inside the notification. And then we'd also like to have an image of what our beer is going to look like. And that's all we need to do in our storyboard. And if I go over to the notification controller, there's this did receive notification method, and this will get called whenever we receive the notification. So we're getting the content out of the request. We're setting up our UI, setting the label and the image and the timer with our date, and starting the timer, and then just setting a little bit of an async task that when that time comes, we're going to stop the timer and say that the beer has actually been delivered. So let's run this one last time. And I'll order a logger again, but I'll change the time here. I'd like my beer to be delivered relatively soon. So now we've got our notification, and our logger should be delivered in about 12 seconds or so. And when it's actually delivered, I could dismiss it if I want to, but I think I'll just keep it here. And when it's actually delivered, the notification content should change, and it'll say that it was actually delivered. Ding. And we just successfully ordered a beer with a watch app. I don't know if that's ever been done before. So that was it for the demo. All of the sample code and slides are already up on GitHub, /cnstoll/beerbutton. On Speaker Deck for developing wearable software. There's also a link from the GitHub page. That's really it for the talk. Thank you all very much for coming. I hope you've taken something away from this for what it's like to build apps for the Apple Watch. If you've already done some watch app development, I think you're already ahead for watchOS 3. But now with watchOS 3, I think the time is really right to start developing apps for the watch. So hope you've taken something away from this, and thank you all again for coming.